Theater for hosting us this evening. Tonight, we will continue our second round of public hearings taking place in all five boroughs. These hearings oh, that's weird.
Sounds good.
Just 1 second.
Okay,
We're good to go? We're good to go.
Every time.
Every time.
so as I was saying, tonight we will continue our second round of public hearings taking place in all five boroughs. These hearings continue our efforts to solicit proposals from policy experts and the public on substantial effective amendments to the city charter. The charter is our city's foundational document because the charter plays a vital role in establishing the structure and procedures of city government. It shapes how decisions are made on a wide range of issues affecting everyday New Yorkers. The commission has been impaneled to conduct a thorough review of the charter and craft proposals to be put before the voters. This is our chance to create a better functioning government in one that is more transparent and in its activities and more accountable to the people. It is an opportunity to make changes to ensure our city is less vulnerable to manipulation, corruption, or fraud. I know that all my colleagues take this responsibility very seriously. While this commission was convened via local law passed by the city council, we are an independent body. Regardless of the merits, any proposal that can be achieved by local law will likely not be up for our consideration. The commission will not consider any proposals that would weaken local democracy or New Yorkers' rights. At our first rounds of borough hearings and through meetings with the community partners and organizations, we've received many suggestions on what to change in the charter. Following that process, the commission staff will produce a preliminary report outlining several focus areas for our consideration, including government accountability, budget transparency, and land use. Our second round of hearings is concentrating on these topics, with each hearing covering one topic. Our meeting last week in Queens focused on budget transparency. And tonight we will hear testimony on government accountability. A final note on the process. We are not the only commission reviewing this charter. This commission is distinct from the Charter Revision Commission convened by the mayor. Both commissions are working simultaneously but separately. Yeah. Okay. So why don't we start today as part of our official business by adopting the minutes from the last meeting corresponding for the testimony of April 29th. They've been distributed to everyone. Okay. So we're going to lay over the minutes because we do not have a quorum. So we'll wait for some of our colleagues. So. All right. So let me, by the way, I should have introduced. I should have introduced our general counsel who's whispering in my ear. Very quietly. And away from the microphone.
We have a
We now have a quorum. I'm back.
If you want.
How you doing? Hey. And let me see. I don't know what type of sit up there.
Was a good entrance.
All right. So why don't we start by having the commissioners introduce themselves? You heard from me, so we start from my left, Mike. Please.
Mike Rassiopo, appointed by Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso.
Rahul Agarwal, appointed by the mayor. Apologies for being a little late.
Rachel Goodman, appointed by the controller.
Dr. Ram Raju, appointed by the Staten Island Borough President.
Good evening, Mark Winston Griffith, appointed by the Public Advocate.
Good evening, I'm Manny Pastrich. I had the honor of being appointed by the Speaker Adams.
Good evening, Robert Maraglia, appointed by Bronx Borough President Vanessa Gibson.
Alan Swisher, appointed by Queensborough President Donovan Richards.
And we're joined by one of our commissioners online, Eduardo. Can you hear us? Can you speak?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Navardo Lopez, appointed by Speaker Adrian Adams.
So thank you, everybody. We do have a quorum now, and we are also aided by our General Counsel, Harry Eifert, who's here. So now, can I entertain a motion to accept the minutes corresponding for April 29? So moved. Motion has been made. Can I get a second? Second. Motion has been made and properly second. Any questions, any corrections about the minutes? Hearing none, let's take a vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Any abstentions? The ayes have it in so order. So we are now going to move off to testimony, but before we start, that's So tonight's testimony will focus on government accountability. And as the commission staff indicated in its preliminary report, increasing government accountability could strengthen New York's local democracy in several ways. This includes securing the independence of oversight agencies by establishing baseline investments and making other structural enhancements, subjecting additional commissioners as senior officials to advice consent, establishing additional means of removing a mayor, not the mayor, but a mayor, increasing transparency surrounding mayoral vote vetoes and opportunities for public engagement in the veto process, adding duties, responsibilities, and procedural safeguards that the mayor must adhere to when declaring emergencies, and authorizing the city councils to submit local laws subject to mandatory referendum as special elections. Today, the charter contains an array of mechanisms and independent agencies designed to ensure that city officials are responsive to the people they serve. Yet structural risks remain, preventing those features from working as designed. The commission is therefore interested in hearing more tonight about how we can update the charter to promote good governance. But before hearing testimony, I remind those in attendance that this is an official, formal government proceeding, and that the quorum must adhere, must always be observed. As such, audience members shall remain silent at all times. If you intend to testify today but have not yet registered to do so, we will accept registrations up to the first 30 minutes of tonight's hearings. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. Video recording or photography is not allowed from the witness table. At tonight's hearings, we will ask folks to limit their testimony to 3 minutes. I will let you know when your time is up. While tonight's hearings will focuses on government accountability, we welcome any testimony on proposed revision to the charter. So I am going to start by calling witnesses in panels. Commissioners are encouraged to ask questions on testimony given, but I ask that you hold your questions until each member of the panel has testified. Finally, I asked that our witnesses and commissioners speak directly into the microphones so that our Zoom attendees can clearly hear you. So we're going to start with the first panel. Councilmember Osei, Councilwoman Nurse will be the first panel, so please welcome them. Use the microphone, you test, make sure this.
Check, 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 check.
You may begin.
Well, this is my first time on the other side of the table, so I'm a little nervous here.
Now you know how we feel.
I know, wow. I won't lie, I promise. Good evening. My name is City Council Member Chi Osei. Welcome to the district that I represent, which is the 36th Council District, which encompasses Bed-Stuy and North Crown Heights. Democracy, as we know, is the cornerstone of a functioning society. In theory, it allows the people to speak up and direct the course of how their government should function to serve them. As we continue to see threats to our democracy on the federal level, it is critical we fortify it in our local governments. Local government is the most accessible form of democracy. It handles the day-to-day lives of our community. It is our local government that takes care of our parks, our libraries, our streets and sidewalks, our cultural institutions, and more. Therefore, it is critical that those who serve our local government are held to the highest standard and reflect the communities they serve. Today, my colleagues and I will be testifying on a number of topics based on our experiences serving the people of New York and where the charter can be improved upon. The focus of my testimony today will be on the need to expand the checks and balances with our city's board appointments. Our boards do not reflect the people of this city. The city has many boards and commissions that impact the day-to-day lives of New Yorkers, including the Board of Corrections, the Rent Guidelines Board, and the Landmarks Preservation Commission. These boards are made up of individuals appointed by the mayor, and sometimes decisions and policies made by these boards do not reflect the needs and interests of everyday New Yorkers. A prime example of this is the Landmarks Preservation Commission. It sometimes designates landmarks that stifle community-oriented development, where development is necessary in the midst of a dire housing shortage, and other times refuses to establish landmarks that would improve the community. Although this is not governed by the charter per se, the Rent Guidelines Board is a key example of why we need more checks and balances in our appointment system. The Rent Guidelines Board has the power to establish rent adjustments for the approximately 1 million dwelling units subject to rent stabilization law in the city. In plain language, they are able to increase the rent. The board consists of 9 members who are all appointed by the mayor. Out of the 9 members, only 2 members are appointed to represent tenant interests under this current administration. However, more than 2/3 of New Yorkers are renters. The board and governing bodies that work and implement policy that impact New Yorkers should be made up of diverse voices that reflect our city. I look forward to hearing from the rest of my colleagues who, like myself, have a firm duty to speak up for accountability and transparency in local government. I thank the Commission for hosting these public forums throughout the city and for their commitment to listening and hearing from New Yorkers on how many can make this a more democratic city that works for the interests of many, not the few. And I urge the Commission to push for government reforms that increase transparency and hold our electeds responsible for serving the needs of the public. Again, I don't believe you guys are paid to be here, right? So I appreciate you for being here and for showing up consistently and hearing us testify. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank
Before
you all.
you proceed, I just want to let the record show that we've been joined by Commissioner Jones online. Would you like to introduce yourself, Commissioner, if you could hear us?
Thank you, sir. Rod Jones, appointed by the City Council Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you. And just want to echo my colleagues' comments that thank you all for giving your time and stepping up to fill this. We know it's a big commitment and takes away from your time off, which I know for many of you is rare. So good evening. My name is Councilmember Sandy Nurse. I represent the 37th District in the City Council. And today I want to speak on the Board of Correction and how we can strengthen that. As the chair of the City Council Committee on Criminal Justice, I am painfully aware that New York City's jails are failing the people detained within them. 38 New Yorkers have died in our jails since the beginning of this administration. Thousands more endure inhumane conditions that are the subject of multiple federal and class action lawsuits involving use of force, lack of medical care, unsanitary conditions, and the illegal use of solitary confinement. New York City is fortunate enough to have the Board of Correction, or the BOC, which is a local jail oversight agency charged with setting and monitoring minimum standards in our jails. However, the BOC currently lacks the capacity, independence, and authority necessary to effectively set, assess, and enforce these standards. Efforts by the current administration to limit transparency and accountability at times led the board chair, who is appointed by the mayor, to have further hindered the BOC's critical work. So these are some changes I think would make sense, and I know that many people in this room think would make sense to fix in the city charter. One, we need to baseline the budgeting of the Board of Correction. The city charter should require that the Board of Corrections budget be no less than 1% of the Department of Corrections expense budget. Currently, BOC's budget is approximately 0.2% of DOC's, and it has faced proposed cuts every single fiscal year since I've been in office, since fiscal year 2022. These cuts limit the agency's ability to hire professionals with the experience and expertise necessary for effective oversight and investigations. A baseline budget would ensure that the BOC can serve as a reliable and independent watchdog and would protect it from retaliatory funding. Two, I think there should be minimum oversight functions. The charter should mandate that board members carry out a defined set of functions, including conducting regular facility tours. Board members need to spend time in our jails, in these facilities, listening to the experiences of people in custody and to staff. Also to look at the state of the facilities, which are pretty deplorable. A reformed appointment process. The current process where the mayor appoints or approves the majority of the board and selects the chair is wildly inappropriate structurally for any oversight body. The charter should require a 9-member board appointed as follows: 3 by the mayor, 3 by the city council, 1 by the public advocate, 1 by the comptroller, and 1 by the longest serving borough president on a rotating basis. The chair should be jointly appointed by the mayor and the council, and the charter should also require that board members have some sort of relevant or lived experience and be compensated as the Civilian Complaint Review Board members are. Additional reforms, and I'll be very quick, the board should have the authority to create committees by majority vote. It should appoint an executive director who may only be hired or removed by a majority board vote following a hearing and a finding of good cause. It should be able to retain outside counsel, particularly when the city law department has a conflict of interest, such as when it's representing the Department of Correction. The board should have the power to close facilities that fail to meet minimum standards. While the State Commission of Correction has this power, it is far less involved in the daily oversight of city jails. Lastly, the board should also have the authority to release individuals who are subject to inhumane treatment in cases where the Department of Correction has been notified of a violation but has failed to act, which has been often. I urge this commission to adopt reforms and fully explore these proposals, and finally provide the Board of Correction with the actual independence, capacity, and authority it needs to fulfill its mandate. Ensuring humane treatment in our jails is critical, especially as we move forward with the plan to close Rikers. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions about the BOC structure and how woefully understaffed and underfunded it is, if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions. I just want to acknowledge we have been joined by our co-chair, Maybe, I don't think we can. This way. Yeah, I know, I definitely have. I just wanna, have an opportunity to,
Settle in.
yeah, yeah, so give us a moment. Let's. I was looking at. So as I said, thank you for your testimony. We've been joined by our co-chair and two more commissioners. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and then we're going to proceed with some questions.
We can do our testimonies again if you'd like to.
You can do that at your own peril.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Arbor Rice, and I'm the co-chair of the commission. I am CEO of the New York Urban League. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
To my left.
Hi, I'm Andrea Selwyn Copel, a commissioner. I'm executive director at National Council of Jewish Women, New York.
Right.
Good evening. Good evening, Suzanne. My name is Serena Longley. I'm a commissioner appointed by New York City Speaker, City Council Speaker Adrienne Adams. I apologize for being late, but I did catch a lot of powerful testimony, so thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to questions. There are a lot. My question, I will start with Councilwoman Nurse. Your analogy of the current structure between DOC and BOC is very similar to the analogy of the police department and the civilian complaint review board. We heard testimony previously at one of our hearings regarding the fact that minimum budgets have not resulted in the necessary or intended actions for a number of reasons, one of which there are procedural things that are done by PD that do not allow the CCB board to continue and to proceed with matters that would affect staffing and affect what the board's actions into it. Do you anticipate that if there were to be a recommendation to have a minimum budget similar to that of what exists or would exist in the Civilian Complaint Review Board, that these kinds of difficult problems will not also occur by the department not moving into actions while the board would still have a budget, a minimum budget in place?
Thank you for that question. So I'll speak to what I can say about why I think the BOC should have a minimum budget baseline. I can't speak fully to the CCRB. What I will say is the ideal number of staff for the BOC would be about 65 people. They're currently budgeted for about 33 and have a staff of 25. They need people who are researchers. They need people who can go to the jails, ask questions, talk to people, talk to correction officers, talk with people in custody, do investigations. They produce very important reports often, and that requires consistency in staffing. And it's a particular knowledge base to hire researchers, investigators. It's not just somebody that you can get off the street. Every year they've managed to hire one or two, but they have to refight for that funding every year. And so it's not baseline, it's not consistent, which means people don't know if they're going to have their job for a year, or if they're going to get it just for 6 months, and then it's not guaranteed. It's not a stable way to provide oversight. And it is also the structure of the board itself does not allow for actual oversight if it is the majority is appointed by the mayor and the chair is appointed by the mayor. They need to have oversight over agencies where the commissioner is the commissioner for the mayor. So having additional staffing, ensuring that that funding is guaranteed is very, very critical to us actually having this BOC fulfill its mandate, which is an oversight entity.
Why 1% of budget? So 1% of the total budget, which is 100.
So right now it's at
16%.
0.2%.
But your proposal is to go from 0.2 to a
It's
minimum of
1%, right?
correct?
Which would hit the ideal number of staffing to provide resources. Remember, I said they're doing studies. They have to put together reports. They run meetings. They need people to be in the facilities. A lot of the board members have zero experience within corrections, correctional health, or fields related to dealing with folks who are arrested, detained, or have gone through jails or prisons. So there's a lot of structural issues there, but having some funding to make sure they have enough staff to go through the facilities, be around, put eyes and ears from outside in there is really important, and they don't have it at this moment.
Okay, thank you. Questions by Commissioner? Commissioner Reagan.
Let me thank you for your for a very insightful presentation. Right. I have some connection, I have some experience with the correctional health because I ran two largest public systems in the country. I was a president CEO of New York City Public Hospital System. And I was also president CEO of Cook County Public Hospital System, which I ran the Cermak Prison's correctional health. When I came back here, I was in charge of taking the correctional health from a private company and brought it into health and hospital services. I'm very intrigued by your composition of the BOC, which makes a lot of sense. That's the way it has been done in many parts of the country where it's been done. And there is always this issue, having run the two large correctional systems, there's always this balance between security and the taking care of people. There's always been, that balance has to be there all the time. One of the major concerns, as with any correctional system in the country, is somehow it has become the warehouse for mentally ill people. Because people who's got no mentally ill people who don't have any other options, act out, they get arrested, and they basically put in the prison system. And they can't, the people who are in the system are people who can't make the bail. If you have the money, you get out. But the people who are really in Rikers are not really convicted. They're really people who can't afford to pay even the $500 bail, whatever it is. So that has been the status of the prison system in the country, unfortunately. And we, as a more civilized nation, supposed to be, we incarcerate more people than any other country in the world. So the problem when we have this kind of BOC, which is connected by different people, a lot of people, this happened in Chicago also, that it's a delusion of accountability. Who is responsible? Because for the entire BOC as a part of it. So what would be your counter argument to the fact that having 3 members appointed by mayor and then 3 by council, and for some reason the longest serving borough president, I never really made sense in that, whatever it means. But how does it really make the accountability pinpoint on 1 or 2 individuals who are able to be
Thank you for that question, and agree with all your points. Right now, Rikers is by de facto the largest mental health facility in the country, which is why it needs such strong oversight, and which we have passed the law in the past to close it down. My belief is that a single executive appointing a majority of a board that is going to provide oversight that will most likely in this scenario be providing very strong feedback on the direction and practices within the city jail is counterproductive to the goal of oversight. And it doesn't create the independence that that board needs to provide real feedback or to take real action. When people are in real harm's way, which, as we know for Rikers, every single person involved in Rikers, including the federal monitor, says every single day that someone works or stays on Rikers, they are at imminent harm of real harm or or fatality. It's not safe. So it needs strong oversight. It needs to be independent. Having a diversity of appointees from a number of different types of stakeholders can ensure real perspectives are taken up and taken seriously, and can provide a buffer to the very real power that the executive of this city has over this current board.
Thank you.
Thank you for both of your testimony. And I want to follow up on the concept that Commissioner Raju put forward. The thing I've been struggling in our intermediary report is the balance between accountability and independence. And ultimately, you make very strong points, and the facts are the facts of what you said. But at the end of the day, if I'm a voter and I want to change things, under your scenario, I have to, do whatever I do to get a new mayor elected. I would have to then do whatever I do to help get a new city council speaker elected, and then that would get me a majority or some other way. So it's the balance of accountability for voters versus the independence, which I'm struggling with. And, I guess I'm going to push you a little bit. If I'm a voter, how under your scenario am I going to make change?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would encourage everyone to vote for all of those positions, and learn who's running for those positions so that you can affect your life on your block and in your lived experience here in the city. I guess your pushback is somehow that different stakeholders being a part of the appointment process to achieve a number of different perspectives represented on this Board of Corrections somehow limits the accountability.
My question wasn't clear. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right now, if my number one issue is fixing the jails, I would vote for the mayoral candidate who I agree with the most, and that mayoral candidate would in theory then appoint people who agree with me. Under your scenario, I would have to, get the mayoral candidate I want, however you get the speaker elected and or 2 or 3 other positions. And so I feel like it removes a level of accountability from the voter. I agree with you. It gives a level of independence, and the balance of those two things, how you weigh them.
I would argue that the council has already set forth what the floor that the mayor has to walk on as it relates to the city jails. We have a legal mandate to close the jails, and we also have laws by the state about the minimum standards of care. And there are clear protocols and practices that every single staff member is supposed to uphold while they're in that facility. The board is there to serve as a check on that and to make sure that those things are happening. If people are not doing their tours properly, if the commissioner is not doing their job properly, if people in custody are not getting medical care, if they're not getting food on time, or if they're being price gouged, or if their phone calls are being secretly recorded, these are all things that we talk about. Or if there's 700 people that have been sexually assaulted at Rikers, these are current cases, or I think it's 1,200 women. These are real things, and the board is meant to have access to those facilities where the general public doesn't. They are meant to provide eyes and ears from outside into what's happening there and bring that back and give it light. And having the council, the public advocate, the comptroller, we do this in a lot of things. We do this in our working groups that are passed by law. This isn't a significant hurdle. And it's all meant to be in the name of transparency. The board hearings are held publicly. The reports are public. The budget is public. It doesn't remove accountability, but it does prevent a mayor who might want to derail or simply choose not to implement a law, which is the current situation that's happening, from doing that because their board is not effectively carrying out their oversight powers that they have.
Thank you. Sure.
I was going to shift to Councilman Osei's initial, sorry, I forgot about the initial instructions. Regarding the Landmarks Preservation Commission, I don't know if it sounds like you have some ideas, and I know I do. So, but my question for you is, do you have anything regarding changing their mandates or what they can look at along with the structure of the commission itself.
I believe that the main concept that I am advocating for here tonight is for there to be a level of checks and balances on the appointment for a position like Landmarks Preservation Chair. I say that because through experience as being a council member, I've seen how that role has been politicized when it is a one-sided appointment without any questioning, without any awareness, without any say from the other body of government that is the city council. I believe it's a very powerful position that can have monumental changes across the community, whether it's preserving, a specific block or preventing development from coming through within a community. Depending on whoever the mayor is who makes this appointment without any say or testimony from the proposed LPC candidate or questioning from the council, I fully believe that position and that individual that's in that position.
I guess on that point though, like, would you also support changing the mandate in terms of what they consider historic preservation? Because like an axe I have to grind in my district, I guess, we've lost 1,500 units through consolidation. My district, for those who don't know, is the 6th community district of Brooklyn. We've lost 1,500 units. We're 4th in the city on lost consolidation units. And, we're supportive of more housing. We're very union in that way, but at the same time, just because we support the Gowanus rezoning, someone in a Park Slope brownstone that gets consolidated from 4 to 1 does not all of a sudden get a spot in another unit further down. To that point, so, and that's 4th because there's also we've lost. I have my land use staff forget me 7,200 units through consolidation. Is that something you'd be supportive of?
No, I think.
Sorry, my point would be: would you be supportive of changing the mandate of the charter or through legislation to allow for the historic? Right now, LPC can't consider that. They only look at the facades and things like that. They don't consider the unit count.
I believe that power should stay within the hands of the council in terms of passing legislation and the mayor having the ability to sign that into law or veto that. I think what I'm advocating for tonight is for there to be a level of checks and balances on the appointment of that position rather than the actual powers within that commission.
So I believe we have more questions.
My question is for Councilmember Nurse. As someone whose day job is working for the longest serving borough president, that composition makes perfect sense to me. So thank you. I apologize if I missed this in your testimony, but I know that you addressed the composition of the Board of Corrections, but the chair. So the chair is currently appointed by the mayor, I understand. I'd be curious about your perspective about whether diversifying the authority for that appointment of the chair as a compromise, as opposed to changing the overall composition of the board, might be something that we should consider.
So my testimony said that in terms of the chair, that could be a consensus candidate between the two of them.
Okay.
Which I think would be very reasonable. We appoint people all the time through the council, and I think it would be pretty reasonable to find someone that both parties could agree on.
Between the speaker and the
speaker.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Sorry, the mayor and the speaker.
Understood. Thank you.
Sure. Good evening. Good to see you both. I have a question for Councilmember Nurse. Just going back to something you said about the pegging the budget to 1%. We've heard testimony over the past few weeks from others advocating for city entities having their budgets be a certain percentage of the overall budget. And I was just wondering about the 1% beyond the fact that it's a nice round number. What's the underlying rationale for that percentage?
Well, you can look at other bodies. So you could look at the Independent Budget Office. That is 1%. So, there are plenty of agencies that call for, like Parks is calling for 1%. They get less than 1% of the city budget. We're asking 1% of DOC's budget. we're not even asking for 1% of the city budget. It's right now, like I said, we're at 0.2%. And so we're at half staffing capacity of the ideal structure. 65 people is what the board says that would really allow them to do the investigations and provide the outside eyes on the facilities. They're at 25 when their budgeted headcount is 33, and they have to fight for that every year. So every year it goes to cut, and then we, do this whole thing. It's really hard to recruit and retain people to work, especially for the jails, at that level of instability and lack of sustainability. As you all know, you all work in a lot of big, important places. You know that that's really key.
Okay, just the 1%. Is it tied to the total budget for DOC? So that would include their capital budget and the cost of housing and transport.
Their expense budget.
Okay, so does that include? I don't know what is in their expense.
Gosh, I can pull up their number right now, but I mean, we're talking about millions and millions of dollars, and right now it's at 0.2%. I can pull up. I had the numbers, the exact budget count if you want.
Well, I'm just thinking, to me, from what I understand, that BOC, the type of work that the BOC does is it's probably mostly personnel and maybe technology.
It's exactly that.
And so tying it to maybe percentage of headcount or
it would be their expense. Yeah,
makes sense.
The DOC has a capital budget that is very heavy, so this would not include that.
And I was just wondering.
That's tied to debt and other pieces. So if you're talking only expense budget, we're talking about personnel expenses, OTPS, fringes and things of that nature, correct?
Yes.
No, I was just going to ask for context. So if at 1% we waved the magic wand and that happened tomorrow, do you have a sense of what you would spend that on beyond what we've got now? I mean, you spoke to it a little bit earlier, but yeah, for context, like right now, what would you be spending?
So, as I've mentioned, the Board of Correction would love to have 60 staff members. Right now, they're budgeted for 33, but they only actually have 25 people working there. So if they were to get that, this would go to the ideal structure and the ideal staffing capacity of the board, which would be 65 people.
Okay, so it's almost all around personnel.
Yeah, they're not, I mean, they're not building things. It's just, they're doing reports, they're hosting hearings on topics, they're inviting guests to come. They don't have stuff like other agencies.
Thank you.
So we have you on the hot seat, so I
was like, I didn't expect the BOC to be so exciting, but I'm really glad they're interested in it. So
that is a testament about how exciting your testimony was as well. So
I appreciate that.
You're here, so we have to ask you a bunch of questions. Thank you for being here. On BOC, just I think I have 2 or 3 questions on the 33 versus 25. I guess my question is, do you know why they're not at full capacity in terms of the positions they already have? And if they're not at full capacity, in other words, if they only have 25, then if you were to bump them to 65, could they even get the people to fill out those positions?
Right. Well, so the reason why we're asking for the minimum is so that we know every year what it is, which just creates stability and the ability to retain people. So one of the positions is that they just were able to fill was a special investigations coordinator, an appliance coordinator, a compliance officer. So these are pretty specialized levels of expertise. You need a certain level of experience. Would you take a job if you knew that the funding for it was only guaranteed for a year? Especially when you have the experience enough to become a oversight investigations coordinator for the largest jail system in the country? When you could go somewhere else and know that you have that job and a contract for a long time, you're not going to take that job. And why should you? because you'd have to fight with the mayor every year and you'd have to get it to be a priority. And if it's not a priority for the mayor, you are not going to be a priority.
No, understood. I mean, I'm going to take the question as rhetorical since
Okay.
we get to ask them. But to answer your question, no, I probably wouldn't take the job.
Okay.
Here's, I guess, my sort of question is it your sort of understanding that increasing the budget is going to help them to fill the positions that are currently unfilled? Is that sort of what you're saying? Right? Because my sort of thought is if they're not already filling the positions that are there, then how are they going to fill the extra 30 that your budget? I guess what you're saying
Break the
is
cycle here. We have to break the cycle of getting funding, not getting funding, getting funding, not getting funding. So every single year, they have to fight for what they have for for half of what they actually would need to be a proper, fully fledged oversight body. And they're, like I said, they're budgeted for 33 positions. They only have 25 filled because it's very hard to fill those positions when you don't have guaranteed funding.
understood. So
yes.
your testimony is if you baseline the funding, then that helps you to now increase the number of hires.
Yeah.
Got it. On your proposal to sort of change the structure of appointments. So my understanding is it's 3 mayor, 3 council currently, and then it's 3 mayor, but they're joint appointments with the justices of the first and second departments. And I think you're removing those joint appointments and now giving those to longest serving borough president, et cetera. And I guess my question is there a reason that you're taking out, you're substituting out the appointments that aren't currently unilaterally mayor? I mean, they're joint. So you're taking out the justices from the entire process. Is there something you see that is either sort of flawed by having those folks in, or is it that you think the new folks that you would put in are just sort of better for the appointments process?
I think there's just a more direct investment from these types of stakeholders. You know, the city and the voters have a chance to remove people like that. You don't necessarily have a chance to remove some types of judges. So at the city level. So this is really the reason we need to do this is because we have a certain law in place right now and it needs to be followed. And we need the board to do the level of work it needs to do to ensure that we get to that law. And in the meantime, to take care of people who are in custody. That's not happening. And if we had a stronger board, we might see different actions.
Okay. And then I guess last question, this has been covered slightly, but I just want to make sure that I have it right. In terms of your proposal is the baseline funding for BOC as an oversight agency. So then are you also in favor of baselining funding for other oversight agencies?
Do you have a suggestion for
DOI.
which one?
I mean, I'll just throw out DOI, but I'm
DOI
saying
should be fully funded.
Yeah,
We should have a lot of investigators and lawyers and researchers in there. And I would say there's a lot of places where we could beef up oversight for sure.
okay.
So except if you do 1% for parks,
Right.
the 1% for the OHI, and 1% for POC, and 1% for arts, and 1%, then the process of the budget begins almost moot.
Henry, you stole my next question.
But
But I mean, that is the sort of
I can't
general.
speak to all of those campaigns.
Yeah.
I agree. First of all, I fully support our parks being fully funded at 1%. Like that was a promise that was made and a promise that has not been kept under this administration. You all know this. What we're asking for is a 1% comparative to a city agency that isn't the largest, right? And we're even talking about their expense part, so not even their total agency budget. But I hear your point taken. I understand what you're saying. Everybody wants what they need to do the job that they do right by the people of New York, you know?
Yeah, totally agree. And thank you. I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to move on.
Last question.
Thank you for answering the question. Thank you both for your testimony. We're gonna call it. Thank you. Councilwoman Joseph is here. Would you come up? I believe you heard the rules before. The rules that we introduced.
Oh, no, I did not. Let's hear it.
Okay. So please keep your testimony to 3 minutes.
Okay.
Speak to the microphone and you're not allowed to record from the table. So those
Say
are
that
the-
again?
you're not allowed to record from the table.
Oh,
Those
okay.
are the main rules. So if you take out a phone, just please, So
Yeah.
would you begin, please?
Sure. Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Rita Joseph, and I'm proud to serve as the New York City Council member, Chair of the Committee on Education. And even prouder to say that before I entered public office, I was a classroom teacher for over 20 years in New York City public school system. I carry those decades of experience with me into every decision I make as a legislator. As someone who worked on the front lines of education, I've seen firsthand what happens when government works for our students and what happens when it doesn't. I've seen policies crafted with the best of intentions falter in execution because they lack transparency, accountability, or true input from those most affected. And I've seen how far we can go when decisions are made collaboratively with communities at the center. That's why I'm here today, because we have a real opportunity to strengthen how our city governs, particularly when it comes to our schools. This commission is tasked with rethinking how local democracy functions. And I believe one of those most urgent issues before us is unchecked power that mayoral control gives over our public education system. Let me be clear. No one denies the importance of strong leadership in education, but strong leadership does not mean exclusive control. Our current system of mayoral control concentrates power in the hands of one person, the mayor, who has the sole authority to appoint school chancellor without any required input or confirmation from city council or the communities that are impacted by those decisions. The lack of oversight is just not problematic, it's undemocratic. Education is too important to be treated just like another agency under mayoral purview. Our public school education educate over 1 million children, most of them Black and brown, immigrant, low income. They deserve a school system that listens to them, responds to their needs, and reflects the diversity of the communities it serves. Right now, that is not happening consistently. Over the years, I've taught under multiple mayoral administration. I've seen the same patterns repeated. New leaders come in with sweeping changes, top-down mandates, often with little understanding of what our students and teachers actually need. Without public accountability, these decisions are made in vacuum, leaving educators, families, and even council members scrambling to respond to policies they have no say in crafting. That is why I strongly urge and believe the city charter should be amended to require advice and consent from the city council for the appointment of school chancellor. This would bring us in line with other major cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, and Houston, where mayoral appointees to lead public executive position must go through a confirmation process. If it works there, it can work here. And it should. Council oversight couldn't be just symbolic. It would mean that whoever is chosen as chancellor would be someone with a proven track record in education, someone with vision and integrity, and someone who respects the value of working with communities, not around them. It would mean a public vetting process that would ensure leaders are accountable, not just to the mayor, but to the people of New York City. And it is about more than just one appointment. It's about creating a system that cannot be easily influenced by politics or special interests. If we want to build a local government that serves everyone, students, parents, educators, taxpayers, then we need a system that checks concentrated power and elevates community voices. This commission has the opportunity to recommend bold, meaningful reforms that includes not only expanding confirmation requirements for mayoral appointees, but also strengthening independent oversight bodies and increasing public engagement in decision-making process. The government works best when it reflects the people it serves. That's what democracy should look like. As a forever educator, a mom, and a policymaker, I'm asking us to take this moment seriously. Let's build a governance model and prioritize equity, not expediency, transparency, not secrecy, and shared leadership, unilateral control. Our students and our city deserves nothing less. Thank you for your time and your commitment and reimagining a stronger and more democratic New York City.
Thank you for your testimony. Wow, look at that. Questions?
Thank you, City Councilman Joseph. It's great to see you.
Same here.
I wanted to ask, how do you think that advice and consent for the chancellor will lead to more accountability specifically within communities and working with parents and providing strategies that are not top down? Like, how do you see that the advice and consent directly addressing the issue that you raised?
It would be similar to a hearing. They would come in and testify and give me the vision. What is your vision for New York City, right? What is the vision? And make sure we have input from students, parents, educators. When I was teaching, it was always, here's a program, figure it out. Here's a problem, figure it out. It was never with us, it was just for us. And that was one of the things I always said, that if I ever get elected, this would be the way that I would center power to make sure the families that are impacted will have a voice at the table as well. So I think a hearing and public testimony to see and questioning, similar to a C-30 process, anyone who knows what a C-30 process is.
So I have a technical question.
Sure.
The City Council had a bill on advice and consent to 20 agencies. Was the Department of Education one of those 20 agencies?
I believe, I'm not sure, I don't recall, but I think so. But then we get a little tricky because state has a lot of power over education.
I asked that technically because one of the concerns that we have is that things that are in the process to local law, that's one of the premises in the beginning, would not be taken out by this charter because there's a process of local law already in place. So I think that would be a question that I would ask our staff to research.
Okay.
Right? Nobody is a part of the 20 as covered by them. That's the question.
Yeah, I don't think it was. I mean, I was just checking right now.
Yeah, I don't think it was.
That's the same question. I don't actually think it was covered by the bill.
Okay.
I was wondering the same thing as like, why it wasn't.
Probably because the state has more control. Like I can't tell or mandate New York City Public School what to do. The state has to. For example, we're launching a brand new curriculum. I can't mandate schools to teach it, but the state can.
Right. So that would impact what we could do.
Right. So it's a little. So we would have to get our state electeds on board because they're the ones who give mayoral control. They vote on mayoral control.
Okay. We have a question online from one of our commissioners.
Sure.
Who wanna.
Thank you, Councilmember, for your testimony and for being here. My question, I think, has been answered in terms of like, could the chancellor be covered by the Charter Commission? I think because of the mayoral control law, it probably limits our ability to do so. But I was also wondering if you had any thoughts about the composition of the panel for education policy. That's another sort of aspect where the mayor has a preponderance of power, and I was wondering if you'd given any thought to either changing the composition of the board of the panel, the PEP, or potentially even instituting fixed terms for PEP members.
I didn't get the last part of the question.
Fixed
part, please.
Fixed terms for the members of the PEP.
Oh, fixed terms for members of CEC?
The PEP, for the panel for education.
Yeah.
Any thoughts or ideas that you have about the composition of it, their terms, anything that you have about?
I would have to revisit that. You know how many times we tweaked it so there would be a check and balance, and it never works that way. Yeah, it always, for some reason, falters on the other side and it falls in line with the mayoral control. We've tweaked it so many times during mayoral control negotiations. So maybe we should do away with certain parts of it, period. I would have to revisit it and give you my thoughts.
Thank you.
We tried that.
Thank you.
We tried to expand how many so they can be a checks and balance. It didn't work. Still doesn't work.
Thank you.
I have a question. Did I interrupt you?
Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Good evening. So as you well know, advice and consent is it's a hot issue, right? It's a third rail in some respects. And we've heard different arguments over the past few weeks around advice and consent applied broadly to many commissioners, or the idea that it should be applied very strategically with one or two, and that one should make an argument for that. And to do it otherwise sort of muddies the waters a little bit. And so I guess my question for you is, what's your argument for, if you think of the agencies that should be subject to advice and consent being some kind of hierarchy of need, what's the argument for Department of Education and the Chancellor jumping to the top of that?
First, like I mentioned earlier, it's a state-controlled entity. So we would definitely have to get that law rescinded, do away with it, and then we can start peeling away at it. But for now, they control New York City public schools from budget, from mandates, from laws. I can't create certain laws. I can't pass certain laws. I can do only reporting bills. I can't do mandate bills. So yeah, that would have to be do away with first. So the state would have to take ownership and say, hey, we're tired of mayoral control. I know they did a study. I'm waiting to really do a deep dive. I know Betty also did a study along with Dr. Young. So we would probably have to do a deeper dive and see what can we take from that would make it work where we can.
Yeah, but let's just control for that for a minute.
Okay.
And we had someone, for instance, advocate for applying this to the police commissioner, right? So is your thinking that in terms of charter revision, it should just be the chancellor? Again, for this, but
to me, all agencies, I should know your vision, how you plan on serving, and how you plan to show up for the work, for the job before you get it.
So your argument here is chancellor should be one of many that are subjected to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? All right, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you so much.
Next, we're gonna call the next panel. We're gonna call Aldrin Bonilla from the EPC. Councilmember Lincoln Ressler, welcome. You come up to testify as well. And Lucky Hu from the Asian American Federation.
Good evening. Thank you to the Commission for Oversight Agencies. The report that was published last month identifies significant vulnerabilities across several agencies tasked with ensuring ethical governance and justice for all New Yorkers. We fully support the recommendations outlined in the report, including ensuring governmental agencies' independence in budgeting and staffing. Oversight agencies must operate free from political influence and conflicts of interest. We support the recommendation to fix agency budgets as a set percentage of the city's total budget to support independent oversight. The appointment process must also be amended to include City Council, the Comptroller, and the Public Advocate to ensure a broad range of perspectives. The City Council should also have advice and consent power over key appointments. 2, enhancing enforcement and transparency. Agencies like the Civilian Complaint Review Board and the Board of Corrections should have appropriate oversight power to hold entities like the NYPD and their city's jails accountable. The NYPD should be required to publicly justify any deviations from the recommendations they're given, and the BOC should be able to fully enforce its minimum standards to ensure incarcerated people are receiving just and humane treatment. 3, limiting mayoral emergency powers. Mayoral emergency powers were greatly expanded during the COVID-19 pandemic. There should be an imposition of reasonable time limits on emergency orders, and the City Council's approval must be required for their extension. Any continuation should include a public reporting requirement. The Council should have the ability to rescind or amend emergency measures. It's important to safeguard all of these things in the city charter so that no single entity can wield unilateral power. In addition to the Commission's recommendations, the Asian American Federation makes the following recommendations that we believe will further strengthen government accountability. 1, establish a Language Access Oversight Commission. In addition to the translation services listed in the report, an independent body that oversees language access can ensure that the city is in compliance with Executive Order 120, which mandates the city services are delivered to citizens regardless of their language proficiency, as well as Local Law 30, which raised the standard of language accessibility. Additionally, the Commission should include representatives that speak New York City's top languages to provide insight and advise the Commission. 2, cultural competency training for agencies. We are one of the most diverse cities in the U.S., and it's imperative that those who are appointed to our city's agencies are able to demonstrate a high level of cultural competence in working with our diverse communities. We recommend that agencies receive periodic cultural competency training. Strategic community outreach and civic education. One of the recommendations the commission listed was the prioritization of expanding language access and outreach to increase community participation. We support this recommendation and also propose that the city partner with community-based organizations who are trusted messengers that deliver vital services and outreach to our communities. CBOs are often delivering in-language accessible information and their trusted messengers to our community members, delivering vital services. CBOs can then deliver in-language accessible information so that community members understand how the budgeting process works, what government agencies do, and what role they can hold in these processes. The city should also dedicate staff for this effort and ensure that community programs are truly representative of our community's needs. Strengthening support services for victims of hate crimes. We also want to take this opportunity to elevate the continued need for victim support services and suggest that the commissioners consider ways they can strengthen the city's access to these services. Through our work with our member and partner organizations, it's apparent that victim services must be strengthened. Amongst other things, the NYPD has the power and duty to preserve the public peace and prevent crime. While we encourage Asian community members to report to the NYPD when they've experienced an assault, we know it's also valuable for them to have access to safety services provided by nonprofit organizations, which includes programming and de-escalation techniques, which supports the city's vision for greater public safety. Asian New Yorkers having access to public safety in all forms is an ideal outcome for both AAF and the city. Implementing these reforms will empower oversight agencies, restore public trust, and ensure that our city's government serves the interests of all New Yorkers. These critical reforms must be considered and codified within the city charter. We at the Asian American Federation thank you for allowing us to testify and look forward to working with all of you to make sure our communities get the support they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Bonilla, you're next.
Thank you. Good evening. Good evening, Commissioners. I am Dr. Algin Rafael Bonilla, Chair of the Equal Employment Practices Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before this vital commission. In a time when the equal employment protections and civil servants are under various and mounting forms of political attack, New York City faces a decisive choice: to reaffirm through charter codification its role as a national model for non-discrimination, fairness, and equity in public sector employment, or to allow that leadership to erode through structural neglect and chronic underinvestment. The EPC stands at the center of this challenge at a profound moment with great consequence, in which this kind of work, in terms of the kind of work we do, is and very much feels under threat. We urge the Commission to advance language that affirms the EPC not merely as a watchdog, but as a pillar in the architecture of New York City's independent oversight, essential to sustaining a just, accountable, and representative democracy. The EPC's constitutional role, established through the 1989 Charter Revision, the EPC is an independent oversight body mandated to ensure compliance with federal, state, and local equal employment opportunity laws across New York City agencies. Our mission is codified in City Charter Chapter 36. We audit and monitor over 145 city entities on a 4-year cycle, assessing compliance with anti-discrimination laws, EEO best practices in recruitment, selection, retention, advancement, and promotion. But the EPC does far more than conduct audits. We exist to ensure that public servants, especially those from historically underrepresented communities, are able to thrive in workplaces that are equitable, transparent, and free from bias. Through rigorous evaluations, policy recommendations, public reporting, educational symposium, and strategic guidance, we help guide city agencies to help build systems and organizational cultures necessary for fairness and inclusion. This work is not ancillary, it's fundamental to good governance. It strengthens our democracy by embedding the principles of equity and justice into operational machinery of city government, ensuring that we not only comply with the law, but attract and retain the most talented public servants in New York City and beyond. Yet our ability to carry out this mission continues to be undermined. One persistent obstacle is the ambiguity surrounding the scope of our jurisdictional oversight. Occasionally, city and quasi-city agencies challenge our authority to audit, monitor, and evaluate their employment practices, asserting, in effect, that they are self-policing or beyond our reach. In some cases, especially as institutional memory erodes through staff turnover, we are compelled to seek confirmation from the law department, despite knowing full well our mandate is clear. This dynamic delays our work, burdens our limited capacity, and sends the wrong message and signal about accountability. The charter must be revised to eliminate any doubt about the EPC's authority to oversee the employment practices of all fully and partially funded city agencies and entities that fall within our statutory purview. Protecting the EPC's independence in budget and staffing. The EPC currently operates on a budget of approximately 1.1 million. A sum lower than what the city spends to remove a single inch of snow in a snowfall event. In contrast to our growing mandate, our staff remains capped at 12 employees due to persistent delays in the Office of Management and Budget in authorizing hires, even after approved headcount increases. This is not a bureaucratic inconvenience, it is a democratic vulnerability. The EPC's funding is subject to the discretion of the very political institutions over which we tend to exercise oversight. This violates basic principles of checks and balances and renders our independence conditional and fragile. We urge the charter to help with language that establish a charter mandated minimum funding level for the EPC. This could be pegged to the fixed percentage of citywide personnel expenditure, ensuring that as the city grows, our oversight capacity grows proportionally. For example, and I know everyone speaks about 1%, but we're asking here for 0.01%. A 0.01% of city personnel costs would provide sufficient scale for our critical work. Exempt the EPC from the program to eliminate the gap. Our modest staffing levels make across the board cuts disproportionately damaging. Authorize the EPC to manage its own staffing, including hiring and promotions without requiring OMB approval that delay block our vital oversight operations. Protect our budget from mid-year rescissions and executive interference, similar to the protections granted to the Independent Budget Office and the Civilian Complaint Review Board to help insulate their work against vicissitudes of daily politics. Together, these reforms will enshrine the EPC's independence in the charter, affirming the city's commitment to equal employment enforcement. We would like to strengthen our oversight powers as well. Ensure that we can have subpoena powers for testimony and documents where necessary. Conduct public and closed hearings in cases of sustained noncompliance. Establish timelines for corrective action and publish compliance statuses of agencies. Impose administrative fines on agencies that fail to implement corrective actions after a defined period. Retain agency counsel independent of the corporation counsel to support these enforcement actions. We also would like the charter mandate to improve in terms of accounting for our expanded functions, in terms of producing comprehensive public reports on occupational segregation and pay disparities, and that we have documented. Conduct racial equity analysis as mandated by Local Law 13, convening the symposium and the sector-based practices, collaborating with DCAS and other agencies, making formal legislative policy and budgetary recommendations. Finally, the EPC board currently consists of 5 members, 2 appointed by the mayor and 2 by the city council, and the chair jointly appointed by both. We would like to expand the commission to 7 members, adding 1 appointee from the public advocate and 1 from the controller. This will bring broader perspectives while maintaining a statutory quorum of 3. That's important. While we expand, we really let the quorum still be 3. Or alternatively, increasing an additional city council and mayoral appointee can also serve similar purposes. Establish appointment timeframes and fallback procedures. If the mayor and the council fail to fill a vacancy within 90 days, the EPC should be authorized to nominate and confirm a temporary commissioner to ensure operational continuity. In the case of a chair vacancy, the sitting commissioner should elect an interim chair from among themselves. Codify qualifications for service. While flexibility is valuable, the charter should indicate that experience in employment law, civil rights, labor law, public administration is preferred to ensure commissioners are equipped to guide this complex, high-stakes work. These measures will help prevent vacancies from hobbling the EPC's governance, oversight, and ensure that the board reflects the expertise and diversity that our mission demands. The EPC is not just compliance work. It is an institution that protects the dignity of New York City's municipal workforce. We investigate, we document, we recommend, and when empowered, we drive change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was about to tell you that.
I know, I saw it in my face, so I cut it short.
You should have seen my face before then.
Yeah. Okay.
So now let's turn over to Councilmember Ressler for her testimony.
Thank you so much, Chairs Garrido and Rice and all the distinguished members of this commission. And it's great to join a panel with Dr. Bonilla and the Asian American Federation. Thank you for the opportunity to share some insights. My name is Lincoln Ressler. I have the great privilege of chairing the Committee on Governmental Operations, State and Federal Legislation. Our last major charter review of substance, of meaningful substance, was 1989. Following one of the worst corruption scandals in our city's history during term 3 of the Koch administration. 35 years later, our city is once again in a moment of crisis, with a growing series of deeply, deeply, deeply troubling allegations in the most senior ranks of City Hall, including the mayor himself. It is clear that the mayor's ability to serve our city is compromised, and the exodus of our senior government, our most senior officials, is unprecedented. This scandal-ridden administration and their ability, or frankly, inability to function begs the question of whether we have the right balance of power in our city government. I am greatly appreciative of the strong, independent, honest leadership of Adrienne Adams and for her role in establishing this commission. Earlier, late last year in the fall, my committee held a hearing to create this commission and heard several suggestions from esteemed charter experts, Eric Lane, who of course was the executive director of the 1989 Charter Revision Commission, Susan Lerner, former Speaker Quinn, among others. And I want to highlight just a few of those recommendations for you all's benefit. Firstly, we have increasingly witnessed that the mayor is refusing to implement duly passed local laws. In fact, the mayor is currently issuing emergency executive orders every 5 days, again and again and again, to avoid implementing legislation passed by the city council to ban solitary confinement. I think it is worth reviewing the balance of powers for implementing local laws and whether we should place the burden on the mayor to go to court and have a law declared invalid instead of forcing the city council to sue when the mayor just chooses not to implement the law. While we just witnessed the law department declining to represent the mayor in a lawsuit against the city council for the first time, at least in my memory, we should consider further codifying the role of corporation counsel with respect to the city council. In particular, limiting the role of the corporation counsel to represent the mayor if the mayor wants to file a lawsuit on legislation passed by the council. Thirdly, on budget revenue estimates, I very much agree with the commission's preliminary recommendations that we should be taking a look for a budget revenue model that increases transparency and accuracy. For as long as I can remember, not just this administration and every other, OMB is consistently far too conservative in their estimates. I think we should look more closely at what guardrails can be put in place to protect against politicization of revenue estimates and examine whether an independent agency like the IBO can play a role in that process. And fourthly, regarding the mayor's emergency powers, I've been deeply concerned about the use of emergency powers under this mayor, and I'm glad to see the commission is looking into it. Mayor Adams has issued emergency executive orders every 5 days on several topics, not just to undermine solitary confinement. I believe that a continued emergency should require a council hearing and consultation, and the mayor should not be permitted to suspend local laws for more than a month without support and cooperation from the city council. Now, I'd like to just speak broadly to how we strengthen and protect independent oversight agencies, which I know has been a focus of this commission. I fully support the commission's careful attention and consideration to strengthening our oversight agencies. We've seen the mayor weaponize budget cuts to reduce the strength and capacity of our oversight agencies at a time when complaints keep going up and up and up. It's vital that these agencies have budget independence, and it's necessary that they have the resources to do their jobs. We'll start with DOI, the Department of Investigation. Under Eric Adams, the headcount at DOI has dropped dramatically. It's down almost 100 positions, while complaints have increased 27%. And I believe, as the DOI commissioner said last week, we have seen unprecedented, I don't know what her word was, my recollection is corruption in the senior ranks of City Hall. I believe we need to provide DOI with more budget independence and the ability to freely hire without interference. OMB continues to get in the way of DOI being able to fill their headcount appropriately. I also support more guardrails on the mayor's ability to remove the DOI commissioner, and I hope this is an issue that the state legislature will take up before the conclusion of session. DOI also plays a vital role in performing background checks on city employees, including those at the highest level. And given recent allegations, I believe it's worth considering whether that role should be formalized and have oversight outside of the mayor's office. Secondly, the CCRB, as Chair Rice knows well, complaints are at their highest level since 2012, the Bloomberg administration, and the peak of stop and frisk. CCRB complaints have increased 62% since Eric Adams came into office, 62% over the last 2 years. And do you know what's driving those complaints? Excessive force by the NYPD. Right now, 22.5% of the complaints that go into the CCRB are ignored. The CCRB hangs up the phone and throws the case away if the NYPD inappropriately takes somebody's property, acts disrespectfully to a member of the public. They don't have the staff or the capacity to handle it. It's disgraceful. As the commission considers various proposals on CCRB independence, I think it's worth considering whether to factor in the volume of complaints in setting their budget. Thirdly, COIB, our Conflicts of Interest Board. The mayor controls a majority of the board, and the budget is subject to OMB approval. Headcount has been cut from 26 to 21. That's a substantial reduction for a small agency. We rely on COIB to enforce ethics issues, but COIB is currently beholden to the mayor and doesn't have this capacity to do their job. I'd lastly just like to comment on advice and consent. Quite simply, advice and consent works. It works for the 12 city agencies that already require it. It works for the state of New York, where we require every single senior agency head in state government to be subject to advice and consent by the state Senate. And it even works in Washington for the most part. The best example is our Corp Council. Since Corporation Counsel has been subjected to advice and consent, there have been 3 Corp Counsels, Georgia Pestana, Judge Sylvia Hines-Radix, and Muriel Good-Trufant, that have each been exemplary public servants that have shifted the orientation of the law department to truly represent the interests of the city of New York, not just the mayor. They have treated the city council as a partner. They have provided confidential advice, and they have allowed us to do our jobs more effectively. This benefits all New Yorkers. Subjecting more agency heads to council review will help ensure appointees of the mayor are thoroughly vetted and meet appropriate qualifications and ethical standards. A public hearing held by the city council will require the mayor's appointees to demonstrate that they are deeply knowledgeable about their agency, they are equipped to serve in critically important leadership positions, and that they will act with integrity. An advice and consent process will allow the mayor's appointees to show that they are committed to working with all relevant stakeholders, not just do the bidding of the mayor, and that they will be responsive to our diverse communities and fulfill their charter mandated role to, quote, advise and assist elected officials. Any mayoral administration confident in the qualifications and the character of their appointees would welcome this model. I fully support expanding advice and consent to the agencies that have been previously identified by Speaker Adams and passed by a majority of the city council last year. And frankly, if this commission wants to go further, I do support subjecting the NYPD commissioner, the FDNY commissioner, the probation commissioner, the corrections commissioner, and others to advice and consent as well. It would lead to more competent and independent leaders in the most important positions in city government. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the mayor?
Thank you all for your testimony. Councilmember Ressler, I do have you mentioned quickly proposal to limit the Corporation Council's ability to represent the mayor when adverse to the city council, specifically in connection with a local law. Can you just explain that a little more?
So there were 2 things that I mentioned that I thought are really important for us to consider. Right now, when the mayor chooses not to implement a local law, we, the city council, has to sue to fight to get the mayor to follow the law of the city of New York. That's bonkers. That is just crazy. Like, that should not be how things work. We should instead lay out explicitly in the charter that the mayor has to sue to get a judge to declare a law invalid in order for him not to be able to follow the law. That would be what a responsible government looks like. Secondly, what I would recommend you all consider is that if the mayor and the city council are in conflict over legislation and a lawsuit is filed on one side or the other, that the Corporation Council shouldn't be involved. That they are intended, their job is to represent all parties. And when they're representing one side or the other, it frankly undermines their independence. It undermines their working relationship with both the council and the mayoral administration. And while we've seen, I think, the 2 corporation councils that have been confirmed by this city council under Eric Adams have acted with more independence than the position had historically. This is a good and smart way for us to ensure that we all have effective working relationships with the law department.
So both sides would essentially need outside counsel.
Yes.
I guess so. From my background, I started my legal career at the law department.
Thank you for your service.
At the city council, I've worked on the mayoral side as well. Or when I was at the Corp Council's office, that was understood as being on the mayoral side.
Yes. When I worked on the mayoral side,
yeah,
there was an expectation that they were there to work for us. And that isn't how things should be.
Yeah, so I agree with the law department should be representing the city. It's a very complex client with multifaceted. I would like a way to have them still to maximize using the law department and not consider them, you know, knocked out in a lot of, because there's a lot of, it's not just local laws. There's a lot of times where the city council or other parts of the government are adverse to the mayor. And I do think it would be a shame to say you can never have corp council involvement. They have the expertise. They also like the price is right. I mean, I think that's, we should find a way to maximize them. And do you have any ideas about, are there ways there could either be walls or parts of the law department as opposed to creating a whole new funding stream for outside counsel? And I think that could potentially get really out of control.
No, I really appreciate that point. I think we don't want to waste taxpayer money that unnecessarily. The suggestion I make is specifically relating to legislation. When there is a conflict over legislation, which happens rather rarely, that is something that I think rises to a standard or a level of import that having outside counsel represent both sides is worthy of consideration. We found that the law department has tried to set up firewalls on issues where they're advising both sides, but ultimately there's still somebody who's kind of at the top of the firewall guiding both sides of it, and it's imperfect. I think they're doing the best they can in a tricky dynamic. I agree with you that the senior folks at the law department, people who've been there for decades, have such rich and deep experience and expertise that is really a benefit to all the folks involved, that bringing in outside counsel, you're unlikely to get that same level of kind of rich expertise. But, you know, I think that the leadership in the law department is trying to navigate these issues in good faith.
I think they have, I mean, in my experience, they had it was always imperfect attempts to try to thread that needle with the multiple sides. So I also wonder, is there another way where there's some kind of still city employee reserve or something, you know, where they're not reporting up to the same person in those kinds of instances, again, rather than just define a whole category of times when, you know, they can't be used. Because I think that if it's the logic of knocking them out on the local law, if you take that and apply, you know, you could easily expand that out.
It's a good point. It's worth thinking through further.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Goodman.
Very quickly, I just want to chime in that the Corp Counsel is also the public advocate's attorney and the comptroller's attorney, but of course it does not work that way in practice. And anyway, that's enough said about that, but I definitely think there's just some challenges around that when we, like in our case, it's been more than when we have wanted to take a legal action. And the Corp Counsel has said the mayor doesn't want to take that action. We are then prohibited from taking it. And that is imperfect, certainly also. So.
Yeah, not to mention the pension systems as well have the same issue.
Right, the pension
that when the pension systems want to take some action in the law department, the same dynamic.
It's he's either everyone, they are either everyone's lawyer or they're just the mayor's lawyer.
Yeah, I think that to be fair, the benefit of advice and consent has been to the city council. I'm not sure it is stretched to the other parties like the controller's office or the public advocate or borough presidents or NYSERS or any of the other entities. I think that we have seen a notable shift in how the law department works with the city council over these 5-6 years that is dramatically different than what I had seen previously.
And can I just add, I think in some ways those other entities need it more than the city council, because the city council has control over its own budget and can hire outside counsel. But my understanding is, at least the public advocate, I don't know about NYSERS, I don't know about the comptroller, but is more constrained in their ability to just hire outside counsel.
So these are important questions.
Thank you. We're going to move on. Just one last question, since you brought it up. What is 0.01% of the budget? What is that total?
Yes, the total in this case, 2.6 million.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question about EEPC because that was my other agency before CCRB. And that is with the 12 employees. So are you able to complete your mandate? Are you able to complete the number of audits that you're supposed to do every year?
As I often say, the minimum, in the sense that we meet the charter mandate of auditing a third of the city agencies every 4 years. But there's so much more that needs to be done in terms of in between 4 years, a lot can happen. So we don't get to do the spot checks. And so it's a lot of best practices.
Can you use the microphone? We got people online that can hear you.
Yeah, so we do meet the charter mandate of auditing the 64 plus city agencies once every 4 years. But we don't get to do some of the things that we want to do in terms of spot checks in the interim, in terms of audits, as well as a lot of the other work that we like to do in terms of making the audits more robust in various ways as the city council starts adding different local laws.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We're gonna call the next panel. Sarita Daftari for the Freedom Agenda, Alana Sibin from the Vera Institute for Justice, and Kay McMahon. Would you come up to testify, please? Ms. Daftari, we will start with you. If you could speak in the mic, please.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Good
Can you
evening.
get a little closer
Yes.
to you, please?
There we go. All right. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Sarita Daftari. I'm co-director of Freedom Agenda. We are led by our members who have experienced incarceration in the city jails themselves or through a loved one. I'll focus my comments today on recommendations to strengthen government accountability by enhancing the capacity, independence, and authority of the Board of Correction to set, assess, and enforce minimum standards in New York City jails. So more Board of Correction for everybody. So for most New Yorkers, the Board of Correction may be a relatively unknown agency. For people incarcerated in New York City's notorious jails, and for the people who love them, the Board of Correction should be a lifeline. But too often, violations of minimum standards in Department of Correction custody go functionally unchallenged when the oversight agency, BOC, tasked with addressing them is insufficiently staffed, overly influenced by the mayor, and unable to take action in the face of continual noncompliance. These gaps in BOC's ability to fulfill its crucial oversight role are especially concerning when considering how vulnerable people are when they are incarcerated. While the NYPD's violations of policy can sometimes be seen in public, recorded on cell phone cameras, and shared widely, abuse of people in the city's jails happens behind locked doors, and only the Department of Correction and Board of Correction have access to the video evidence. Behind these locked doors, 38 New Yorkers have died since the beginning of this administration, while thousands of others endure conditions that are the source of multiple federal and class action lawsuits. These conditions further undermine democracy and due process when considering that over 80% of people at Rikers are detained pre-trial. There are far too many cases in which people have decided to take a plea because staying at Rikers feels like a worse punishment than going to an upstate prison. While the isolation of Rikers Island compounds this out of sight, out of mind dynamic, there will continue to be a need for strong independent oversight of the Department of Correction even as the Rikers jails are closed. So to strengthen BOC's ability to fulfill its essential oversight role, we recommend the following, which we'll elaborate on in written testimony that we will follow up with. The Board of Correction must have a minimum protected budget, which must be at least 1% of the expense budget for the Department of Correction. The board and its members must carry out a minimum set of functions. The board should consist of 9 members who will be appointed as follows: 3 by the mayor, 3 by the council, 1 by the comptroller, 1 by the public advocate, and 1 by the longest serving borough president on a rotating basis. The chair of the board should be appointed jointly by the mayor and the city council. And I want to say on these last 2 points, it is inconsistent with the function of an oversight body for its chair and the majority of its members to be chosen by the mayor. That has to change in terms of Board of Correction. The board should establish such committees as it deems necessary. The board should appoint an executive director, taking into account the diverse needs of the organization, who can only be hired and removed by a majority vote of the board and after a hearing and finding of good cause. The board should be able to retain outside counsel to carry out its duties. The board should be authorized to close facilities that fail to comply with minimum standards, and the board should be authorized to release people subjected to inhumane treatment, especially when the department has failed to comply with remedying the conditions. Thank you. I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Ripple. Is that, sorry, Sibin? Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Hello, members of the commission. Thank you for listening to my testimony today. My name is Alana Sivan, and I am the director of the Greater Justice New York Initiative at the Vera Institute for Justice, which works to end mass incarceration, protect immigrants' rights, ensure dignity for people behind bars, and build safe and thriving communities. To support government transparency and accountability, we recommend 4 charter revisions that will restore faith in government. The first is strengthening the independence and oversight capacities of the Board of Correction. The second is expanding the Civilian Complaint Review Board and making its disciplinary recommendations binding. The third is improving the accuracy and readability of the New York City budget. And the fourth is greater transparency regarding the city's progress towards closing Rikers Island. When it comes to the first recommendation, you have our written recommendations, and I believe it's been very adequately covered by my colleagues here and by City Council Member Nurse earlier. So I will skip that portion and go straight to the CCRB recommendations. And I won't read my testimony. I'll just sort of talk a little bit about them. So we know that cities like Chicago and Miami have a 1% tie to the CCRB, to the NYPD's budget for their complaint review boards. There's no reason New York City shouldn't have at least that amount. We know that the CCRB has been unable to investigate all of the complaints that come before it. There were 700 complaints that were dismissed in 2024 because they simply could not investigate them. So the budget of the CCRB does need to be increased for that reason to at least 1%. The charter should also be amended to give CCRB direct access to body-worn footage and other relevant investigative materials. And the CCRB should have final disciplinary authority rather than allowing the commissioner to override the CCRB's recommendations. This will increase confidence in the city's police force and ensure that the city's police watchdog is able to hold officers to a reasonable standard of conduct. There's also a need to improve the accuracy and readability of the New York City's budget, particularly when it comes to the Department of Correction. Currently, the New York City budget is particularly opaque and challenging to understand for advocates, for city council members, for people who really want to understand how the DOC is funded. For example, there are broad units of appropriation that can obscure actual agency spending. And so this is something that needs to be clarified. And one way of doing that is requiring a panel of experts from the Office of Management and Budget and the IBO to review units of appropriation every 5 years and produce new or recommend new ones to ensure that they correspond to agencies' actual operations. And then finally, create a stronger mechanism by which the city must close Rikers Island. We see that right now holding the city accountable to this task has been a challenge. And so some ways to strengthen that accountability can be through the charter, first by requiring the Office of Criminal Justice to provide monthly written updates, and also amending the requirements of data that needs to be produced in the mayor's management report, so that it can include updates from the Office of Criminal Justice, the Department of Correction, the Department of Design and Construction, the Department of Housing Preservation. That would include progress on construction of the borough-based jails, population updates, including efforts to reduce the population to the numbers necessary through programs like the Article 6A program and through the Local Conditional Release Commission. And also following the closure of Rikers, transfers away from Rikers Island. So thank you so much for hearing my testimony today, and I'm happy to provide any answers to questions.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. McMahon.
Good evening, commissioners.
Good evening.
My name is Kate McMahon. I'm testifying today in my personal capacity as a former employee of the Board of Correction, where I worked from 2017 through 2021. So with that context, I'm going to focus my remarks today in support of 2 recommendations that you've heard something about already to ensure BOC's independence into the future. The first one is setting a minimum budget for the BOC that's at least 1% of DOC's expense budget. And number 2, changing how the board seats are appointed so that City Hall doesn't have undue influence into the board's oversight responsibilities. The board's modest budget and staff count pales in comparison to the two massive agencies it's charged with overseeing, because it's actually oversees the Department of Correction, but also functions of correctional health. At a practical level, this means that BOC staff are often functioning in several roles at once. In the 4 years that I worked at the board in the title of Deputy General Counsel, I also spent 2 years as the de facto head of human resources at the agency, and then another 2 years as the head of the prison death review program. My experience wearing several hats at the Board of Correction was not uncommon. Nearly every person working there was performing more than one role. I've had few occasions in my life to work with such dedicated and competent people, but the lack of staff resources in such a crisis-prone environment meant that talented people burned out very quickly and the turnover at the agency was very high. Every year, the board must plead its case for more resources to discharge its functions, often in the face of proposed cuts by the mayor. This annual exercise consumes a lot of resources from BOC's already overextended executive team, and it also hinders the board's ability to plan long-term investments into effective oversight structures. Most critically, having to go hat in hand for adequate funding every year compromises BOC's mandate to hold mayoral agencies accountable, lest its funding be slashed. The most famous example of this was during the mid-90s when Mayor Giuliani threatened to entirely eliminate the Board of Correction, ultimately decimating the budget and the staff by half. It's counterintuitive that a watchdog agency should be this vulnerable to the very powers that it oversees. If New York City is serious about truly independent oversight of its blighted jail system, then BOC deserves a reliable and robust budget that allows it to comfortably meet its city charter obligations without fear of retribution for doing its job well. Relatedly, the mayor's outsized influence over the composition of the board must be reduced if BOC is to truly be independent. As it is, the mayor effectively controls 6 of the 9 appointed board seats. In my time at the board, City Hall's influence could be felt in the agency's rulemaking processes, our public reports, and critical board votes. This is not the way an oversight body should function. The board's leadership cannot be largely dictated by City Hall and claim independence at the same time. The board must be able to function consistently as an agent of the public across administrations and despite political winds. For these reasons, the commission should consider charter revision to provide BOC with an independent minimum budget and ensure that the mayor's board seats are limited to 1/3. Thank you.
Thank you all for your testimony. I wonder if you could clarify something for me. This is just, as they say in my neighborhood, the mathing regarding the 1% proposal we heard multiple times. The current budget, expense budget, the Department of Corrections about $1.3 billion. 1% of that is about 112 million or something like 13 million or something in that nature. Your current budget for the Board of Correction, it's about 3 to 4 million. So an increase to 1% would bring the current budget from 3 to 4 to about 112 million. Am I?
From 4 million currently to 12. I'll redo the math too, because the math is.
So, right, go ahead, please.
I believe it's because the current is 1.2 billion. And 1% of that would be 12.
12? Okay. I'm checking the mathing is what I said,
You
right?
gotta get this right.
So you're talking about increasing the current allocation for about 3 times this current allocation.
Double its current, so from 4 million to 12 million, but add 8 million more. Okay.
Well, that's
Doubling the budget. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
okay.
The amount that would be added is double the current.
And so what we heard earlier from Councilwoman Nurse regards to the staffing that's there, and as we've heard from the Civilian Complaint Review Board at a previous hearing, even when you guarantee the staffing, if the staffing is not authorized by OMB, you still have a problem, right? And so the question is, even setting a minimum budget, does that provide the solution you need for the proper staffing you need to run an agency?
I can just say regarding that we have heard those concerns from allies and partners who are focused on the CCRB and their responsibilities, and maybe Alana can add to that as well. But I mean, it does seem like the OMB control is a loophole that needs to be addressed, but I would say that's a reason to give the board a minimum budget and address that loophole rather than, not give the board a minimum budget. There's ways that other cities and municipalities are providing their agencies with this minimum budget and somehow not running into this interference from the administration or their version of OMB. So it does seem appropriate to address that too.
Right, but if right now you have 33 funded positions, but you only have, I think it was 25 actually hired.
Yeah.
With the current budget that you have, what will guarantee that increasing it to 1% or 12 million would still allow for the proper hiring to do the job?
Well, I think Councilmember Nurse and Kate also spoke to the cyclical and unpredictable nature that leads to a lot of those positions being unfilled. So a guaranteed protected minimum budget is going to mean you actually have the time to recruit and fill those positions and address the turnover.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. It's just, I know when we worked at the board, it could take 6 months to a year to bring someone on board just because staff resources were so limited for hiring. And then by the time you're able to go through that process, you have OMB approval that you're awaiting. A lot of times you may have lost the candidate in that period of time. So I think standardizing and stabilizing the funding in general would help with that. But a second point I just want to make is that tying the budget to 1% of DOC, I think it's not simply doing the math of where the DOC's budget's at now. I think many of us can agree the DOC's budget is very bloated. Certainly if and when the city closes Rikers Island, the idea is these investments we're making now will save money in the long term. So I think just really tying the stability of the oversight body to the agency is important to think about, not just in terms of today's DOC budget, but the budget into the future.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Reggie.
What you need is really not more people, you need more people with special skills. Everywhere in the country, correction has become a specialty by itself. Not normal people, normal doctors don't take care of correction health because the physical, medical, mental, psychological needs of that population is a specialty by itself. So what we really lack here is that we are not able to hire the right kind of people to take care of these people. So I would strongly suggest that it's not like hiring 34 people who are just being doing the job. You really need people with the expertise in correction health to really advise you the right way to manage them.
Well, maybe I'll just start out by clarifying. So Correctional Health Services is one of the agencies that the Board of Correction provides oversight for, and there are important specialties there. And that's sort of their hiring is another question. For the Board of Correction, we are insisting that they do, in fact, need increased staff because they are the only outside eyes and ears in the jails. And they don't provide healthcare, they provide oversight and monitoring. And as we have seen, their current staff number is woefully insufficient. It's barely 0.2% of the Department of Corrections budget. Oversight agencies in other municipalities that are providing oversight for law enforcement agencies have at least 1%. And the kind of positions that would build out, I actually think Kate could add more to, but it is both more people and people with the right skills. So I would say that both are necessary.
To supervise the people who really manage the correction health, you need to have expertise, people with the expertise in correction health to manage. Otherwise,
They will still have their own managers.
Yeah, and I
But the
understand.
outside oversight is the question.
For BOC to monitor the correction health, you need to have, BOC should have expertise in correction health to manage that. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes, that's correct. I know during my time at the board, we tried to build that function out more to bring in people who had medical backgrounds into the staff, but that has not been consistent. And that's another thing that speaks to the budget and the ability to attract talent.
Yeah, but to be fair, they could have the right skills. Who are they going to supervise if they don't have anybody staffed under them? Just this is the point about balancing the two.
And I'll
Anyone
just,
else?
if I can add as well, I'll also just say that one of our recommendations is not just increasing the number of board members, but also making it so that some of those board members meet certain qualifications. For example, having worked in correctional health or having lived experience in the carceral system. So that addresses your point as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you for your testimony. We are now going to call the next panel. Bennett Stein, Colette Hare, East New York Restoration, Local Development Corporation, and Robert Camacho from Brooklyn Community Board, number 4. It's Robert here. Robert? Yes, we started. Thank you. Would you start, sir?
Yeah, thank you, commissioners. My name is Bennett Stein. Speaking of my personal capacity, I worked for the Board of Correction between 2015 and 2021 as the Director of Policy and Communications at the board. I understood the board's mandate to be twofold in helping city officials, the public, with 2 goals: minimize the harms of incarceration and reduce the use of incarceration. The last time that the board's powers and structure were considered was in the 1970s after the rebellions at Attica and the rebellions in New York City jails. We are amidst another extended crisis here in New York City's jails. And we are perhaps reaching a turning point where we'll have new, smaller jails in the boroughs. Those new jails will be just like the old jails unless we have new, stronger, expanded oversight. You all have the opportunity to create that strength and that expansion, and I encourage you all to take this opportunity. The 2 most important charter changes that you can make to give the board that stronger capacity you've heard about. One is to tie the board's budget to the Department of Corrections budget. That will not solve all of the board's staffing problems, as you all have said. We will still have to do the dance. The board will still have to do the dance with OMB to approve those positions. But I would rather go to the OMB and do that dance if I have funding, rather than go to the city council and go to the mayor and beg for funding and then go do that dance. The dance will occur. Secondly, we sort of change the way that the board members are appointed. As you've heard, right now, the mayor controls appointments I think there are many ways that you could change it to disperse that power, including continuing the court's rule, but actually saying that it's a court appointment, not a mayoral appointment. Additionally, I recommend you take 2 major steps to expand carceral oversight in New York City. One is currently the charter allows for city council members to visit the jails at any time unimpeded. You should expand that power to allow for all elected officials and their staffs to visit the jails. The jails should not be seen as untouchable, ungovernable places. They should be places where we expect our elected officials and their staff to go and meet with constituents and see how government actually happens. Secondly, there are major gaps in carceral oversight throughout the city, not just in the jails. We don't have strong oversight of NYPD lockups, and we see deaths happening there. We see major crowding happening there, major abuses of power happening in NYPD lockups. We also see gaps in oversight in ACS secure detention facilities, where again, we see mass violence. Third, we see we are set to see an expansion in the number of people held against their will in our city's hospitals, but we don't have strong oversight of conditions within our hospitals for people that are held involuntarily. So I'd ask you to think about expanding the board's powers to include those other spaces. The board has over 70 years of expertise monitoring carceral conditions, and we should apply that expertise to these places that are still too dark and still without oversight. I'll submit additional written comment. Thank you.
Ms. Mayor.
My name is Colette Payne, and I am here as the Executive Director of East New York Restoration Local Development Corporation. We partner with the Civic Engagement Commission, which was created through the 2018 Charter Revision Notice to run a citywide participatory budgeting program with guidance for participatory budgeting administration to partner with community-based organizations such as ours and civic leaders to increase awareness of city services and assist New York City agencies in developing city engagement initiatives. And I am here because we have been the lead member. We are one of the CBOs who partners with this commission mandated through this charter. We have been the lead member in the participatory budgeting work for the last 3 years in East New York, and have as well as implementing one of the projects of the City Engagement Commission, which was a college preparatory program. We're here to testify on behalf of our organization, our coalition partners, and our constituents. What the City Civic Engagement Coalition funding has allowed us to do is to bring our community of East New York more involvement in the processes of city government, to have them know more about where the money goes. I think that through the mandated workshops that we do, we go and we speak, and Councilwoman Nurse, as well as Councilman Banks and Barron previously have been involved as well. But we are a coalition of tenant associations in NYCHA, local community gardens, people involved in the school process. And what we have done is go to schools, go to senior centers, go to neighborhoods, create our own rallies to talk about what is participatory budgeting, where the money of the city usually goes, where it can go, and encourage people to vote on it. It has allowed us to get our community to identify what our community needs and how to mobilize community members to participate in civic engagement. The funding currently allocated, which is why we are here, is insufficient to run a true citywide PB process. And the decision of what to invest in something that's mandated in the latest charter shouldn't be this year, yes, that year, no, or cut it here, cut it now. It's dependent on each administration that sits in City Hall, which creates a high degree of instability for the process for the Civic Engagement Commission. But for us as community-based partners already challenged by many other issues, it is also stressful. The instability, which you've heard over and over, is unacceptable for a process that was proven success, both in the city council, in schools, as part of the MAP program, and of course, citywide as the People's Money Campaign. I'm going to answer the question of why we're asking not for 1%, but 0.1% before you ask it. The amount is 112 million, and it is more than for the staff of the commission. It is also given to community partners. That is across the city in different neighborhoods, especially those neighborhoods designated as being particularly stressed. That's where the grants to do this collaboration comes from. That's where the money to do projects that have been designed by the community goes. So 1 year, it'll be this amount, and then you find out, oh, the mayor cut the budget. So what was agreed upon has to change. So we asked for a baseline funding of 0.1%. And that is why we need it for the stability to continue this work. 0.1% of the overall budget. 0.1% of the overall city budget. But stability is key as opposed to what is it going to be this year.
Thank you. Mr. Camacho. Thank you. Thank you. I know you got a loan, baby. I get paid. I don't volunteer. So my name is Robert Camacho. I am the chairperson of Community Board of 4, which is in Bushwick. I have been on the board for over 30-some years. Served on my community. If you know anything about Bushwick, you know we have a lot going on. I'm here to speak specifically about community boards. Increase budget line. The board needs funding to keep the higher staff as needed. We currently have a district manager, which she's here, she's going to testify, which I'm her boss. One full-time community coordinator, one part-time. And additional funding will allow the board to plan for staff needs in present and future. Members also members required to attend one meeting before they are appointed. I agree. That new people in the community and don't know nothing about the community, and don't know nothing about the community. So members have to know but they are getting into before they join the board. 2, consolidate support functions for community boards into one entity. The agencies that are mandated to support the community board are either known or in the board president's office. When they do not like the community boards or do not consider us priority, it is difficult for us to do our job, especially when we have to cater to LCEC and some of the issues that are going on that we have to do a check and balance, and we are a city agency. I am here to say, if the community board, the resources we need to do what we have to do for our community, it's true that this recommendation does not require city mandate. However, people should know politics are getting in the way of democracy. So please, thank you, and please support us in any way that we can. As you know, I'll be turned out in 2 years, and we'll have new people making decisions for this community and our community at large. I've been there when nobody wanted to be there. My grandmother, 106 years in Bushwick. Now all of a sudden we have Christopher Columbus syndrome and they want to push the natives out. And the charter revision has a term limits. I don't know why they did that. I know Manhattan had a whole list and they put in the charter revision. Some tense in regards to putting people to go out there to vote. So people don't understand what the community boards do at large. I was a young kid in Detroit. We had seniors and people told me, we don't do, if you want something done, this is how you do it, get involved and make sure. I'm going to be 64. My mother and father thought I went past 14. I think I beat all odds. So we really need to support the new people that are coming. We understand that change is hard, but we want to be part of the change too. Don't forget about us. And that's the problem. So we really want to work with you guys to make sure that there are checks and balance. And I just didn't understand the narrative of when people voted that in, because if the borough presidents and the city council can appoint, they can put us when we want to. They created that narrative. And I tell them constantly, because if you can appoint someone and take someone out and put it back, you have the power. But since you left us here, our seniors that are vulnerable, that have been doing this for so many years, all of a sudden you turned them out. And some of them are even passing away because this was the thing that they used to come to meetings to keep them going, to keep our seniors motivated.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Camacho.
Thank you.
I just want to be cognizant of the time. It's 7:15 already. Our hearings were scheduled until 7, so we'll pass it. I'm going to turn over some questions. I'll ask the commissioners to keep them short or briefly. Brief questions, please, if you have any questions of this panel, because we really need to start wrapping up. Thank you all. Okay. And so the next panel, Natalie Fiorenzo from Holt, EAC, Celestina Leon, and Anna Dunn. Natalie, you would like to start, please? Could you speak in the microphone, please?
Yeah. Sorry, didn't realize it came out. Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Natalie Fiorenzo. Thank you so much for holding this meeting tonight. I'm here as a member of the Jails Action Coalition, as well as the Halt Solitary campaign. I'm an advocate for incarcerated New Yorkers. I work at a public defense office in Manhattan, and I'm also a constituent of Brooklyn. When I first heard that the New York City Charter was up for review, I was surprised and really excited. As I've grown just as a human being in the world and learned more about everything around me, I've realized that one of the biggest setbacks in our country, in my opinion, is the fact that we have the oldest active constitution in the world. It's no wonder that the rules that guide our everyday lives feel very antiquated. It's because they were written 250 years ago. This is obviously not a meeting about changing the US Constitution, but it is about changing what is effectively our New York City Constitution at a time when our rights, specifically the rights of the most vulnerable, are being thrown out the window. And when headlines leave us with a new way to panic every single morning, I hope this new charter that you all helped to create can shine as a beacon of hope and of acceptance, and a stand against bigotry and dictatorship. That's why this committee has to dedicate itself tirelessly to taking this opportunity to enshrine and reinforce human rights for New Yorkers. I work with incarcerated New Yorkers at my job every single day and have for the past 5 years. I've worked with clients who have died in correction facilities, both in the city and in the state. And that's as a direct result of the inhumane and deeply unsafe conditions on Rikers Island. I also work with clients who maybe have not passed, but now have irreparable physical or emotional damage that they're going to be living with for the rest of their lives due to their treatment in custody. If there's one lesson I've learned since I started this position, it's that DOC operates lawlessly. They truly could not care less what they're supposed to do. They do what they want to do. And there's only one oversight body that has control over that, and that's the Board of Correction, which you've all heard so much about tonight. Unfortunately, the board does not have any real ability to prevent or stop DOC from violating its minimum standards, which outline humane treatment and basic rights in the jails. Ignoring these minimum standards are exactly how 38 people in custody have died in the time since our current mayor took office. What would make the Board of Correction more effective and genuinely save lives are the recommendations that you've heard so much tonight, so I won't repeat them, but I will just speak a bit to two. Number one, the budget. There are over 7,000 people on Rikers Island right now. That number is going up and up every single day due to the current climate. At our office, we represent 200 to 300, give or take, at any moment. And I put in complaints to the BOC every single day, like horrific complaints about treatment, about people being left in their cells for days without methadone, without medication, without meals. And when I check back in on them a week later, did someone come to talk to you from the board? I told them to check in on you. No, they do not have the manpower to look after the 7,000 people whose lives are literally at risk every single day. So they need that budget so that they can have more people to do that work. And number two, in terms of who is picking the chair of the board, I urge you, if you have any time, I know you have a lot to do at this commission, but if you're able to watch any Board of Correction hearings since the current chair has been put in place, he acts so unprofessionally. He is actively patronizing on the record to his other board members. It is a disgusting sight to see, especially when, you know, he's supposed to be in charge of this board that has such a serious mandate for people's lives. So anyway, thank you for your time and please stay focused.
Thank you for your testimony. Celestina?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Celestina Leong, and I'm the District Manager of Community Board 4 in Brooklyn, which serves Bushwick. I've been in my position for 8 years. I'm grateful to be here and have been looking forward to this, and thank you all for going past 7. I'm also the facilitator of the Future of Community Boards Working Group, which include district managers citywide. In December 2021, the group released its first report outlining shared challenges and recommendations for all 59 community boards, some of which informed items that have already come before the commission. Echoing Mr. Camacho, CB4 chairperson, as noted in the commission's April report, the recommendations proposed do not require charter revision. However, the current structure language leaves room for broad interpretation by elected officials, principally the mayor and borough president, which has led to a decrease in support with an increase in responsibilities for the board. There are also inconsistent practices across the boroughs to address district manager concerns and instances where they referred back to the board with conflict and forced to work in an environment under conditions that would raise a grievance for union staff. As it relates to the Civic Engagement Commission, community boards, yet again, were not their mandate priority and essentially a way to defer the responsibility of providing community board assistance. Many recent changes are top-down with no community board communication or partnership. It has become evident that the charter is open to interpretation, and it often does not favor community boards. CB4 is ready and willing to be part of the process. I respectfully urge the commission to see the community board recommendations. One, to solidify community board autonomy with clear language around accountability for support, and also to provide workplace protections for district managers who are non-union employees as an opportunity, a rare opportunity for our voices to be heard and to strengthen local democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dunn. Sorry.
Hi, my name is A.D. Dunn, and I am a queer and trans lawyer and writer and teacher. And I'm here in support of Jail Action Coalition and Halt Solitary Confinement's recommendations regarding the Board of Correction oversight. I'll just name some of them, but you've heard all of them. Enhanced independence to set, assess, and enforce minimum standards, authority to enforce minimum standards, authorized to close any jail, facility, or unit where they do not meet the minimum standards, authority to release people subjected to inhumane treatment, and to place limits on the mayor's power by creating safeguards on use of emergency powers and a limited veto power. I want us to kind of just give urgency to these things and say from my personal experience why they're important. I don't believe in jails, but I believe that if we're going to have them and allow them to exist, they must be the safest places possible. They should be safer than our streets. They should be safer than our homes. This is because they are where our society practices sanctioned dehumanization behind closed doors, and this practice can only lead to death and destruction of human life. And that loss of life will continue to have ripple effects beyond the avoidable tragedy itself, the person's loss of life, for the families of that person and their loved ones, for the friends and lovers of that person, for the people responsible for the safety of that person, and for the families of those who are responsible for the safety of that person. I was a teacher at Rikers when Layleen Polanco died in solitary confinement. The day that it happened, I remember sitting with the folks in my class, sitting with the heaviness of the feeling and the knowledge that they had that the system, that to the system, their lives were not worth the minimal amount of care that could have saved them or could save them. Because as it has been made clear to everyone, Layleen did have a seizure condition that everybody knew about because it was so severe, even I who had not met her. They knew that, and they put her in the box alone and left her there to die. The next day I went to work and I asked my supervisor what would happen now that a person died in solitary confinement. She looked at me and she said, "Rosie's doesn't have solitary confinement." Let that sink in, right? Because it was called punitive segregation, my supervisor basically told me that what had happened last night or the night before, that a person had died, her response was, they didn't have solitary confinement. This is part of the problem, this obfuscation by language. This is why oversight into our jails is so important. Layleen was not in my class, but there was a young person in my class, and I just want to talk about solitary for a couple of minutes and then I'll be done. Because this young person in my class also had a seizure disorder. I don't know what it was, but I was incredibly moved when even when the person started to have one of these episodes. The collective heart rate of the room spiked as the person began to lose control of their body. But then 4 or 5 other people in my class, their friends, surrounded the person. One held their hand, one put their hand on the back of the person's neck, another looked into their eyes and talked to them in a calming voice. The person's community was saving them from the danger that was happening inside their body and the danger of the system that their body was forced to survive. And this was happening before my eyes. This is one of the reasons that solitary confinement is torture. It is the forced removal of a vulnerable person from their community. And I should say a further escalation of what the torture of jail is in general. The reason that oversight is, I'll skip ahead here because this is all already kind of been said. But what I do remember is that shortly after Layleen died, the people in my class were being threatened with solitary confinement. And I, tried to understand what that must have felt for them, right? And I will close with a note from a friend who was in that class. She's now attending law school in Boston, and couldn't be here herself, but she wanted me to read this. My experience in solitary confinement was nothing nice. As a human first and as a Black trans woman second, the treatment I received in solitary confinement was inhumane. I was chained to a table with no food to eat. I was called out from my gender, not because of my appearance, but because officers were just being rude. And when I replied back, I was sent to solitary confinement. I even witnessed a dorm mate, Laylene, who never returned from solitary confinement. She died alone in a cold cell due to doc's negligence. Did I mention she was trans? Not that it should matter, because she was a human first, right? It's unfortunate that those same officers who walk in from the outside world can so quickly forget that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I'm gonna have to leave. Unfortunately, I have another commitment that I have to, but I understand that other people who are going to be testifying. So if there are questions
I have a
for,
quick question.
yep, go ahead.
Thank you all. This is for the two individuals who spoke about BOC. I've spent quite a bit of time on Rikers myself. There's a volume problem with the BOC. They just can't be everywhere. You both sort of alluded to, are there perhaps, so one of the things we will consider is budget and more people, but when you speak about more teeth for enforcing the minimum standards, do you have any specific ideas there? And I also wonder about, are there any opportunities for technology to be deployed to help with monitoring within Rikers or within other, when Rikers goes away, other jails in the city?
I think that there were a couple of things that I think you may have mentioned and other people mentioned earlier, in terms of besides budget that can help to strengthen the teeth a little bit. And that's mostly the ability to actually shut things down when they're running illegally. So I'll give you like a very quick example of something that just happened. DOC just opened another new solitary with a different name, I think on February 7th or something. So far, every one of my clients that has gone there basically tries anything and everything to get out of that unit because it is so unsafe. So they're sending themselves back to the other solitary to get out of the worst solitary. The point is, it goes against every single minimum standard the BOC has set. Access to religion. They did not have access to religion during the month of Ramadan. They were barely getting their meals. They're supposed to be locked out at 10 a.m., but they're getting locked out late. So none of them have access to razors because they only come once a day. A bunch of stuff like that. Some more serious, some a little bit more, razors, obviously serious. I don't need to go on. All to say, the BOC can't do anything really about that. They can maybe issue a statement, maybe say like, you're violating our orders, but they cannot say, shut this down. They don't have that kind of power. And that would make a huge difference because then maybe DOC wouldn't be able to get away with it.
But if they, so you're saying like in the moment, an ability to shut something down?
Yeah, to say you need to close this new unit that you pulled out of nowhere and put them back in general population. This is inherently dangerous and people are already getting hurt. Sorry.
Can I ask? What was the second piece? Technology? Are you talking like? Can you say more about what you're intending?
Thinking about the panopticon effect, and if you can have, it's well understood by correction officers that they're largely out of sight. So would having additional, and I don't know what's currently in there, but would having, video monitoring or other devices to monitor be something that you think would be worthwhile considering, or other, just other ways other than just staff?
I think in my analysis that would end up harming incarcerated people more. It would be more surveillance. It would be more, it would be like stripping more of their rights away from them. Even if we intended for it to, kind of the way that body worn cameras can sometimes have a negative impact on a situation for the person who's being abused by the police, because it can be manipulated in such a way that the state can use it to say, look, that looks like a crime, right? But so I would be.
Perhaps it would be good if also sometimes in incarceration individuals and there are breaking rules, are doing things they aren't supposed to do that leads to a reaction. I'm not saying that's always the case, but I mean, I think what's the problem with having that? I don't want to derail this too much. So I was curious if there was a general reaction to the.
I can very quickly say that the BOC has unfettered access to all of the surveillance in the jail, so they can see the video at any time. But on the terms of technology, maybe this is literally me just like thinking out of my head, but like tablet, like something that would just make it quicker to like talk to people, get their reports, maybe put it like write it down. DOC lives in the Stone Age. Everything is done on paper and it takes forever for any, like they can't even tell you where someone is at any given time because there's no like computer system. So obviously with thoughtfully created procedures to keep information safe in like the tech age we live in now, but any sort of way to streamline like reporting and accessing clients and stuff like that, I think would be helpful.
Thank you. I want to thank the members of the panel for your presentations. I appreciate it. Once again, I'm Arthur Rice. I'm going to take over chairing of the final panel. I want to bring to the stage Emily Mills, Christopher Johnson, and Joshua Franklin. I want to once again thank the commissioners for staying overtime for this conversation. Thank all the people who have come out to Brooklyn or come down the road or up the street in order to have this conversation. And I want to assure those folks who are doing this presentation right now that your comments will be shared with the rest of the commission. So please do not feel that that your remarks are falling on deaf ears. So thank you so much. And Emily, if you want to begin.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Emily Mills. I'm a resident of Brooklyn with a master's degree in climate science and communications from Columbia University. I work as a resilience planner for communities across the country, and now more than ever, I am compelled to request resourcing for climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and environmental justice be incorporated into the charter. Extreme heat, sea level rise, increasingly severe storms, and heavy cloudburst precipitation put people and infrastructure at risk across the city. By 2050, these hazards are projected to worsen with sea levels rising to 2.5 feet. The number of heat waves doubling and twice as many 100-year storms like Hurricane Sandy. The city also committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050. The impacts of climate change have become increasingly alarming over the past 10 years that I have lived here. In 2021, Hurricane Ida broke rainfall records with 9 inches of rain falling at 3.5 inches per hour and took the lives of 14 people. This happened the night before I began my graduate program in climate science, and many students and professors were not able to attend orientation due to flooded subways. In 2023, smoke from Canadian wildfires enveloped the city and shot the air quality index up to 342, a level considered hazardous for all residents. In September of the same year, a rainstorm caused flash flooding in my neighborhood of Gowanus. 9.8 inches of rain rushed downhill in Park Slope, pooling on 3rd and 4th Avenues and damaging homes and businesses. The construction site across the street from me flooded with enough water that when a worker tried to recover a submerged truck, they struggled to keep their head above the water. Climate change is affecting us today. The New York City Charter establishes multiple entities and initiatives that work to adapt to climate change, such as the Office of Long-Term Planning and Sustainability, as well as the Green Building Standards. I want to emphasize the need to expand support for climate mitigation and adaptation and ensure that equity and environmental justice are at the hearts of these initiatives. I would like to request continued resources for safe and connected bike lanes, resilient stormwater infrastructure, compost infrastructure and food waste reduction, increased tree canopy and green space, green jobs, support for socially vulnerable communities, and intentional community collaboration on climate resilience. Together, we must ensure resilience is captured in the charter to promote a safe future for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, yeah, good afternoon. My name is Christopher Leon Johnson. Thank you for the board for staying past 7 o'clock. I thought they're gonna be like, they cut it at 7 o'clock. So I appreciate you all for staying here after this time to hear what we gotta say. We really appreciate it. All right, so first off, I'm calling on this commission with the help of the other commission to not only make the city council chair of the criminal justice committee, the chair of the Public Safety Committee, ex officio members of the Board of Corrections, non-voting members of the Board of Corrections. I'm not saying that they should be able to vote, but they should have non-voting capacity at the same time, be able to sit on the board of the Board of Corrections. I am calling on the city charter to amend the police protection statutes when it comes to the Speaker of the City Council and the mayor and the comptroller and the public advocate to add give security details to members of the City Council that is a chair of a committee, and make it a mandate that the chairs of the Public Safety Committee, the Transportation Committee, the Criminal Justice Committee, and the Environmental Protection Committee have a security detail. I am calling on this commission to allocate at least $250,000 into an independent investigation to the sexual assault of Councilmember Sandy Nurse that occurred in the corrections, the Rikers Island. I want to know why nobody has followed up on that horrific situation. Like I said, no, you can like Councilman Nurse, don't have to like her, but that shouldn't be happening. I am calling on this commission to amend it to give security protection to any council member that is a victim of a crime. And a victim of a crime don't have to be meaning a physical assault. That can mean a threat. That can mean a horrific email. Someone barges in the office. If a council member get a threat, they should get police protection. It shouldn't be where only the speaker and the public advocate and the controller and the mayor get security detail. These council members, remember, they are elected officials. They have a power with the budget. They have a power with that pen. There's people out there that don't like them, that is on Twitter, that are really nasty people. And this needs to be rectified. I think that the city charter needs to be amended to where that council members that request a security detail, request a NYP security detail, should get one. And like I said, from that situation with Sandy Nurse, she should easily have one. If I was in the city council right now, I would have put a bill and I would have advocated the police commissioner and the mayor to give Councilman Sandy Nurse a security detail. She's a victim of sexual assault. At the same time, this case has never been solved. I never saw this in my life where a person in this position of power, like Councilman Sandy Nurse, was sexually assaulted and nothing ever happened, no follow-up, nothing at all. This lady should get police protection for the rest of her life, to be exact, because she's like, this person's going to come out. You never know what this person is. He might be a stalker. He might be crazy upstairs. You never know what he's going to do next. You never know he's going to blame her for his downfalls in his life, and he might try to retaliate. So like I said, I'm calling on the city charter to be amended to where council members get security protection. They should call the Sandy Nurse Protection Act of 2026 in this charter, because this should be in honor of Councilman Sandy Nurse. This should be in honor of Councilman Sandy. I'm sorry I'm going so long, but thank you. And thank you. Sorry.
We have Joshua Franklin, who is on Zoom.
Okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon or good evening to the commission. Thank you all for staying late to accommodate all of the speakers this evening. I'll make my comments as brief as possible, and I hope and welcome questions. First and foremost, with respect to rent stabilization board, I believe that should also be added to the current city charter. Currently, it's not in the current city charter and acts solely as a matter of mayoral discretion. Additionally, the panel of educational policy is not enumerated in the New York City charter, which can create expanded powers for the mayor at this current time. With respect to the mayor and its veto power, currently I do recognize that with respect to advice and consent, that any nomination that is not challenged by city council or goes beyond 30 days is then deemed confirmed. I do believe that the opportunity for a notice and hearing by city council in conjunction with the mayor should be enumerated in the city charter. Additionally, to the extent that there are any laws that the mayor vetoes that have specific right to citizen civil liberties should also be under advice and consent. I know that we had a fair amount of information or testimony about this today. Next, with respect to some of the legal matters of the city, specifically, as I stated, any agency with respect to any civil liberties should be have advice and consent powers added to them. And specifically with respect to the corporate counsel, that the mayor's ability to transfer or assign attorneys should be grossly limited to ensure that the law department does represent the interests of all of the city and its members. Lastly, with respect to any updated sections of the charter, I hope that the commission would support expanding the charter to further support community boards and potentially increase their periodic reports from being yearly to potentially quarterly to ensure that individuals that may not be involved in monthly civic engagement at least are providing quarterly and not annual reports directly from the community boards. And secondly, that the city charter should also support increased transparency and innovation within both the city charter and amongst the community boards, as I recognize as innovation and transparency is a very big part of our city as we have modernized. Transparency is only written in the city charter once, the term innovation is only written in the city charter once. However, the term transparency is not in the city charter at all. Lastly, and with respect to mayoral appointments and removals, I recognize in the city charter that there are 71 positions that can be appointed by the mayor, yet only 7 that have rights to the city council, and maybe only 1 aside from the community boards that are brought by the Brooklyn Borough President. And so allowing all of these mayoral appointments or more than 10% of such mayoral appointments to also go through the city council and maybe also the public advocacy would increase the transparency and kind of disconnect the city from its seeming lack of oversight for the mayor. And lastly, that the mayor should at no time have the right to remove anyone without cause without first having a notice and a hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for everyone once again for hanging with us. I want to remind everyone that our next hearings are Monday, May 12th at the Bronx Museum of the Arts, focusing on land use. Wednesday, May 14th at the Staten Island Museum at Snug Harbor, focusing on budget transparency. And Monday, May 19th at John Jay College in Manhattan, focusing on government accountability. All hearings are 5 to 7, and folks are invited to testify either in person or via Zoom. Registration and further details on all hearings are on our website at www.thecommission.nyc. I want to thank everyone who testified today, watched online or in person, and the commission staff who organized this meeting. Please note that if you were unable to testify today due to time constraints, you can submit written testimony of any length up to 72 hours after this meeting concludes. Please send your testimony to info@thecommission.nyc. Are there any questions or other business from the commissioners before we adjourn? Okay, hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion